God's faithful plan of redemption. In the story of Israel's deliverance from Egypt, we see God's heart, His power, and His unbreakable promises. These few verses in Exodus 6 are more than historical. They are deeply personal. They reveal who God is, how He works, and what He desires for His people, both then and now. Let's walk through these verses together and uncover the depth of God's name, His covenant, His will, our human struggle, and the divine assignment He gives His leaders. The covenant. Exodus 6 verses 4-5. I have also established my covenant with them, and I have remembered my covenant. Here God brings His covenant to the forefront. It's not a new plan. It's the fulfillment of an eternal promise made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. What is the meaning of covenant? And I have also established my covenant with them, to give them the land of Canaan, the land of their pilgrimage, wherein they were strangers. Meaning of covenant in this context. Hebrew word. The Hebrew word for covenant is berith, which means a binding agreement, a solemn promise or pledge, often confirmed by a sign, sacrifice, or ceremony. Biblical definition. A covenant is a sacred agreement initiated by God with human beings. It is not just a contract. It's a relational commitment sealed by God's faithfulness and often marked with a promise, a sign, and a response from the people. In Exodus 6 verse 4, God is reminding Moses of the Abrahamic covenant, to give them the land of Canaan. This covenant was first made with Abraham, Genesis 15 and 17, and then reaffirmed to Isaac and Jacob. It included a promise of land, Canaan, a promise of descendants, a promise of relationship. I will be your God. Key characteristics of God's covenant. Initiated by God. God chooses to bind Himself to His people. Based on grace. The covenant is based on God's promise, not human merit. Includes promises. In this case, the land of Canaan as an inheritance. Demands trust. The people are called to believe and obey. In Exodus 6 verse 4, the covenant refers to God's faithful, unbreakable promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob to give their descendants the land of Canaan. Even though they were strangers or sojourners in that land, God had sworn to give it to their descendants. This covenant is now being fulfilled in the Exodus story, as God prepares to deliver Israel from Egypt. In Exodus 6 verse 5, when God says, I have remembered my covenant, He's referring to the Abrahamic covenant, His solemn promise to give Abraham's descendants the land of Canaan, make them into a great nation, bless all nations through them. Summary insight. God's covenants show that He is not distant or forgetful. He sees, He hears, and He remembers His promises. His covenants are relational, redemptive, and eternal, leading us to the ultimate fulfillment in Jesus Christ. God's will in action. Exodus 6 verses 6-8. In a series of bold declarations, God says, I will bring you out. I will rid you. I will redeem you. I will take you. I will be your God. I will bring you into the land. I will give it to you. Each I will reveals the will of God in motion, a divine rescue plan that moves from deliverance to relationship, and ultimately to inheritance. God's will revealed in Exodus 6 verses 6-8. Each statement from God begins with I will, revealing His sovereign intentional will. These are not suggestions or hopes. These are declarations of purpose backed by His covenant. Let's explore each one. 1. I will bring you out from under the burdens. Verse 6. God's will is to set His people free from oppression. He sees their suffering. He intervenes personally. This reflects His desire to lift every heavy burden we carry: sin, shame, fear, and injustice. Application. God doesn't just acknowledge your pain. He acts to bring you out of it. 2. I will rid you out of their bondage. Verse 6. God's will is total liberation, not just relief but release. Egypt was more than a place. It represented slavery and domination. God desires complete freedom from what enslaves us. Application. God's will is not partial deliverance. He wants you fully free. 3. I will redeem you with a stretched out arm and great judgments. Verse 6. God's will includes redemption and justice. Redeem means to buy back or rescue by paying a price, pointing ahead to Christ. The stretched out arm shows his personal involvement and power. Great judgments reflect that God is also just. He defends the oppressed. Application. God fights for you and pays the price to win you back. 4. I will take you to me for a people. Verse 7. God's will is relationship. He doesn't just free us to wander. He frees us to belong to him. You will be my people, and I will be your God, is the language of intimacy, identity, and covenant. Application. God's will is not just to rescue you, but to relate with you. You shall know that I am the Lord your God. Verse 7. God's will is that we know him. Not just know about him, but to experience and recognize him personally. Every act of deliverance reveals more of his character, his faithfulness, power, and mercy. Application. Every struggle you overcome reveals God more clearly to you. 6. I will bring you in unto the land. Verse 8. God's will is fulfillment. He brings us out of bondage and into promise. The land represents inheritance, rest, and purpose. Application. God's plan doesn't stop at freedom. It includes a purposeful future. 7. I will give it to you for a heritage. Verse 8. God's will is legacy. What he promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, he now brings to pass. Heritage means lasting possession, not a temporary reward. Application. God's will spans generations. His plans include you and your descendants. Application for today. These verses show us that God's will is not passive. It is active, redemptive, and deeply relational. His plan is to bring you from bondage to belonging, from burden to blessing. Human response. Exodus 6 verse 9. But then something heartbreaking happens. They hearkened not unto Moses for anguish of spirit and for cruel bondage. Here we see the human condition. Crushed spirits silenced hope. Despite the glorious promises, the people couldn't believe. They were too hurt to hear. This teaches us that even when God is at work, human hearts can still struggle to receive. But God doesn't stop there. Exodus 6 verse 9 KJV says, And Moses spake so unto the children of Israel, but they hearkened not unto Moses for anguish of spirit, and for cruel bondage. This verse is deeply emotional and tells us something very human and still relevant today. What does anguish of spirit mean? Hebrew word study. The phrase anguish of spirit in Hebrew is kotzer ruach, literally, shortness of breath or crushed spirit. It suggests a deep emotional distress, mental exhaustion, or spiritual despair, like someone who is too weary, hurt, or defeated even to hope. Why didn't the people listen? 1. Overwhelmed by suffering. They were under cruel bondage, mentally, emotionally, physically exhausted from Egyptian oppression. 2. Too broken to believe. Even though Moses brought God's promises, deliverance, redemption, inheritance, the people couldn't receive them. Their spirit was too crushed to hold on to hope. 3. Trauma silences trust. They had endured generations of slavery. Disappointment can numb the heart, and when you're drowning in suffering, even good news can feel out of reach. Spiritual insight for today. Many people today are like the Israelites in Exodus 6 verse 9. Too burdened to believe, too hurt to hope, too tired to trust. But this verse reminds us, God still works even when we're too broken to respond. His promises are not based on our strength, but on his faithfulness. Anguish of spirit is emotional and spiritual brokenness, a deep, inward grief. The Israelites could not hear or believe Moses because their suffering had silenced their hope. But God did not abandon them. He continued his plan of deliverance even when their faith failed. Charge versus covenant. Exodus 6 verse 13. And the Lord gave them a charge unto the children of Israel and unto Pharaoh. Even in the face of unbelief, God doesn't abandon the mission. He gives Moses and Aaron a charge, a divine assignment to carry out his covenant plan. While a covenant is about God's promise, a charge is about our participation. This final transition ties everything together. God gives us his promises, covenant, but he also calls us to action, charge. In Exodus 6 verse 13 KJV, we read, "And the Lord spake unto Moses and unto Aaron, and gave them a charge unto the children of Israel, and unto Pharaoh king of Egypt, to bring the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt." What is the meaning of charge in this context? Hebrew word. The word charge comes from the Hebrew word, tsava, which means to command, to appoint, to commission, to give orders with authority. Biblical definition. A charge is an authoritative instruction or assignment given by God to someone for a specific task. Carries weight, responsibility, and accountability. In Exodus 6 verse 13, this means God officially commissioned Moses and Aaron. They were not just speaking for themselves, they were under divine authority. The charge was twofold: to speak to the Israelites, God's people, to confront Pharaoh, the enemy of God's people, with the goal of deliverance. Key elements of a biblical charge. Authority comes from God, not human permission. Responsibility requires obedience and perseverance. Accountability, the one given the charge, is answerable to God. Purpose always tied to God's larger redemptive plan, e.g., freeing Israel. When God gives a charge, he gives clear instructions, spiritual authority, courage to face opposition, a mission aligned with his will. Even if people don't listen, verse 9, and even when it seems impossible, God's charge means he will empower you to carry it out. Charge in Exodus 6 verse 13 means a divine command or commission, a sacred assignment given by God to Moses and Aaron to confront Pharaoh, lead the Israelites, and accomplish God's will for deliverance. Charge example. Exodus 6 verse 13. And gave them a charge unto the children of Israel, and unto Pharaoh. Moses and Aaron are commanded to act, to confront Pharaoh and lead the people out. The emphasis is on obedience and responsibility. Covenant example. Genesis 17 verse 7. And I will establish my covenant between me and thee, to be a God unto thee and thy seed. God promises to be with Abraham's descendants forever. The focus is on God's commitment and relational bond. God is still working. From his name to his promises, from his will to our response, and from his covenant to his charge. God is still faithful. And just like Israel, we too are called to trust, respond, and walk in the freedom he offers.